Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Sunday chat today is going to circle around the subject of space for keeping orchids in, basically, for obvious reasons. That's what the channel's about. But I've always had a little bit of envy for those that can grow outside. So I'm going to start with that, even though I can't, and I'll explain why as we discuss that sort of thing. Now, I'm going on the basis that you've got a couple of orchids and you're thinking of expanding quite dramatically. Now, that's not normally the way it works, is it? What normally happens is it expands dramatically and then you worry about the fact that you haven't got enough room. It's just that way round. But let's imagine that everything was planned and organised, and we can discuss that as it goes along. And then you'll stop and think, oh, I wish I'd done that, like I would. Anyway, so first thing you've got to ask yourself is, if you're going to grow outside, can your orchids stay out there 365 days of the year, 24/7? Or are there any reasons, whatever, to have to bring them inside? Severe weather springs to mind. Sudden weather that doesn't normally happen in your area. Can you cope with it, or are you going to lose your orchids? It's a question. So if you go into tying all your orchids onto trees, they become fixed, they become attached. Now they've got to put up with whatever the weather throws at them, as in the wild. But is your area the same as where they come from in the wild? And chances are no. I mean, there's a lot of people grow outside in places like California, Florida. They get a bit of wind and rain now and again. Some of that is severe enough to even take your tree down with all the orchids on it. So you have to ask yourself, is it safe to build a collection that becomes fixed outside? It doesn't have to be fixed, does it? You can still have wires, ropes, racks fixed to fences and walls and all that sort of thing, where the plants are individually hung and they can be picked up and moved at relatively short notice. But that's the question I think ought to be asked, is if I had something extreme that was predicted that I had to bring my plants in for, can I do it? Where would they go? Can I accommodate them? How long would that severe situation go on for? Days, weeks, yeah? Would I then have to start thinking about watering them in somewhere, wherever that might be? I mean, you might cram them all in your garage and leave the car out in the weather, because your orchids are more important. Whatever. So if you're going to grow outside, seriously think about fixing orchids to something where they can't be removed, because that could be their downfall. Yeah. And in addition to that, if you're thinking about that sort of space, what type of space have you got? You might have a fence on one side of your property, 6-7 foot high, whatever, keep the nosy neighbours out. Mind you, it stops you being a nosy neighbour as well, two-way. But yeah, so you've got a fence that effectively, when you're looking at it, you're facing south. So that fence is probably going to be in the shade virtually all of the time. That might be just what you want, and it might not be. But just remember, outside shade is brighter than inside bright light. Your eyes play tricks on you, and it will. My camera readings, on a sunny day, pointing at some plants that were in the sunshine and taking a reading, that reading is impossible to get in here. Yeah? But some plants in the shade on a bright sunny day is a similar reading to the best light I ever get in here. And that's in the shade outside. Yeah? So watch your light levels outside. And make sure when you get new plants, they're acclimatized to that outside. And I would suggest starting them in the shade, and then perhaps moving them to somewhere where they get a bit of morning sun or a bit of evening sun. Just gradual, gradual, gradual. Nothing sudden when you change light. Unless you're coming from bright to shade, of course, in which case you just will get on with it. 'Cause that doesn't have a dramatic effect. They might stop growing for a bit, you know, but it's the other way round that does the potential damage. So that's sort of outside. Next you've got dedicated space that's not your house. So we're talking greenhouse now, that sort of thing. Now if you plan on venturing into the world of a greenhouse, where you put it is paramount. And a lot of that depends on what you think you're going to put in it. Yeah? Do you want it to get pretty hot when the sun hits it? Do you ever want the sun to hit it? Yeah? Because there are some people site their greenhouse in such a way that the sun hardly ever touches it because they want to grow cooler stuff. Yeah? So you need to think about that. Most greenhouses will need shading for a lot of the year, not necessarily all of it, and a lot of that will depend on where you live. Yeah? But if you go for a greenhouse, you've got to think about, well, what sort then? Quite honestly, in my book, timber greenhouses are beautiful, but they will fall down eventually. So whereas if you get like a metal framed apparatus, aluminium, that sort of thing, in theory it will last longer than you will. Yeah? You might get the odd pane of glass break or something like that. I've seen a greenhouse where the whole of one side was beaten to pieces by a massive hailstorm. Yeah? So all the glass on one side of the roof and down that side was beaten to bits. And where did all that glass go? All over the pots and plants. That, you know, wasn't funny. We had somebody on YouTube had a roof tile come down in a storm straight through the conservatory roof, and all the glass went all over the plants. It took a long time to clear up and get fixed. And you have to bear that in mind. If you've got an enclosed area that's nicely controlled, all your temperatures are good, your humidity's good, and you get a pane of glass go, how quick can you fix it? Now obviously you can throw something over the hole temporarily, but you have to think about that sort of thing. And again, depending on where you live, if you go for that separate thing like a greenhouse, you're going to need power and you're probably going to need water. Although you might get round that, but you will need power. You're at least going to need a fan on, and you might need a heater in the winter. So you need a decent power supply. And that should have one of those circuit breakers up the front end where it leaves your house. So that if anything goes wrong, it decks it there and knocks the lot out. Yeah? There are elaborate alarm systems you can get nowadays whereby you'll get something will wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning because something's gone wrong in your greenhouse. So you can get quite elaborate with gadgets. So the greenhouse road is something I would love to do, providing I had the land and a site that was suitable. Because the last thing I would want is a greenhouse that's in the sun all day. I can't cope with that. The temperature in there, even in the UK, would be so extreme there'd be a lot of things that would never live in there. I'd be so limited as to what I could grow. But I could get away with it if I had heavy shading. And the best shading you can get on a greenhouse for keeping temperatures down, I'm not on about light, I'm on about get that temperature down, is shading that's at least a foot away from the glass. So if you're going to have a greenhouse and you want to try and keep it cool, you need a frame all around your greenhouse that's about a foot away from the structure of the greenhouse, and that's where your shading goes. That will allow some airflow over the glass and it stops the sun hitting the glass. That gap is quite important. That can make a lot of difference, a hell of a difference. I mean, I know somebody that didn't even, strictly speaking, didn't shade the greenhouse because they had an apparatus that was a sort of frame that would close up so it could just be folded and put on the ground. But when required was like 2 poles and some shading that just got stuck in a special place that would hold it still, and the other pole got stuck in there. It's 3 or 4 foot away from the greenhouse and tall. The whole side of the greenhouse was shaded from a long way away, and apparently that dropped the temperature about 5 degrees. So it does work. But, a greenhouse will need shading. You're not going to grow orchids through bare glass in a greenhouse. They're going to burn like hell, and your heat level will just skyrocket, even with the vents open. And greenhouses have never got enough vents. My greenhouse at my other house was designed by me. I wish I could have picked that up and bought it, but I couldn't. But basically, it was a apex roof or whatever you call it, like that, and the vents opened that way. From the bottom, hinged at the bottom, right up to the peak of the roof, and they opened outwards like that. Heat went straight out. And vents were all round the lower sections, you know, in the wall, because it was one of those with a wall so far up and then the greenhouse on the top, which I still think is best. A walled structure about this high, yeah, followed by your glass. I think that works best. And if I could have a greenhouse for what I would call a perfect design, it would be, the width of it would be more important than the length. Because in my ideal world, I would walk in a door and there would be a little gap in front of me, yeah, followed by a central set of shelves and a path either side with shelves over to the two sides. So it would need to be wide. You know, if you're looking at 2 foot of shelf, 2 foot of walking, 2 or 3 feet down the middle, another 2 foot of walking and another 2 foot of shelves, that's pretty wide. Yeah, but that would be important because I'd like that central bit, and that central bit would have a solid top shelf that would catch water. The reason, all my clutter would be able to be stored underneath and it wouldn't get wet because it wouldn't get dripped on, and it wouldn't be very tall because I would have hangers going that way where all my hanging plants could go over that central section, leaving the walkways clear, and as you walk down you'd have access to them. Yeah, and if I used the sprayer on them, they would drip down but not get on my kit. So that would be how long it would be would, you know, not quite so important, but I'd love to have that width and be able to have a central, you know, I can't do it here. You know, I could have something coming out here, but then I'd lose it. I think I've utilised the space in here as best I can. So then, coming back from the greenhouse, choice of materials, what it's made of, wood, some sort of metal, aluminium, rot-proof, everything like that. Plus you've got, what are you going to do with the gaps in between the frame? Is it going to be glass or polycarbonate? Quite a bit difference in cost. Polycarbonate double sheeting gives you a form of double glazing. Double glazed panels for your greenhouse in glass, you'll need a bank loan. And they'd have to be the right size to go with, yeah, it starts getting complicated. But a double skin will save you a fortune in heating and, to a degree, keeps some of the heat out. That barrier works both ways, you know, that gap in between. But double skin polycarbonate, if you can afford it, the bigger the gap, the better. I think it starts at 4 mil, but you can get 6 and possibly 8, I'm not sure. The beauty of that is it's normally opaque, so you've automatically got a bit of shading straight away. So that's a greenhouse. You've then got this, which is effectively a conservatory, but a building that's attached to your house with a nice door to get through from one place to the other. Now that is a greenhouse in so many words, but it's not, because it's only got 3 sides and a roof, not 4. Yeah? So that's important, and where the side is that isn't part of the structure, it's part of your house, the aspect of that is quite important as to what this is capable of doing or not. Now I'm facing southwest, not directly south, so it's keeled over southwest, and the house is 2 stories, so I don't get any sun till about 11 o'clock in the morning. So this place never gets hot up to about that point, and then gradually the sun starts over in that corner, and as the sun comes over there it moves along here. Yeah. Now in the peak of the summer it's up there as it comes over the top of the house. In the winter it's down there. The difference in where the light comes from is quite dramatic. But if it faced south, I'd get that sun earlier in the day. Yeah, that would make quite a bit of difference to the length of time I had the heat. Now in the winter, on a sunny day, I do actually get a benefit of a bit of heat from the sun, and I look forward to it in the winter. But it isn't very strong, you don't get much. The beauty of this is access to the house and being able to see your orchids from inside the house without having to leave the house. I mean, I can imagine some people are weather resistant, weatherproof, and don't care if it's chucking it down with rain. I do. When it's chucking it down with rain, it's for looking out of the windows at, not for being in. I like to be out of it. So if my greenhouse was down the bottom of the garden and it was chucking it down with rain, I think I'd look at it and think, you ain't getting watered today. I'm not going out in that. So I don't have to worry about that because I'm, self-contained. Greenhouses and conservatories have a lot of similarities. In what I call a commercial conservatory that's often got an aluminium type coated frame and glass and this, that and the other, you can't start making holes everywhere. Yeah, so it starts getting a bit complicated for fixing things without spoiling it. Now because this is timber, I can put a screw in wherever I flipping like, and I took panels of glass out. I did what I like out here, and it doesn't even belong to me. But my mum said, do what you like, but just make sure it stays up, because there's a lot of this is rotten. I reckon one good storm it'll come down. It's not in a healthy state. The timber structure is not good. There are bad bits, very bad bits. The post that holds the door is completely rotted off at the base. It's not held on by anything. It's hanging from its attachment at the top. And the only reason that part of the building doesn't fall down is because the door's there. And the door fills the gap and keeps that post in place, and the glass panel the other side holds it from the other side. But it's not fixed at the bottom. It's rotted off. The corner over there is rotten. It's pretty bad. And this one's gone as well. Basically, it's old. I presume it's probably cedar wood, I don't know, but even though that's classed as a hardwood, it's only just a hardwood and it don't last forever. And you can coat it with preservatives as often as you need to, it still won't last forever. So that's that. But within those types of structures, you will have bright spots, shadier spots, duller spots. You might even be lucky and have some cooler spots, places where the humidity might be a bit higher. All that sort of thing. So you might have a few microclimates where you can grow different things or allow for that. And then last of all is in there, the home, that space. Now, first decision you've got to make when you start expanding your one Phalaenopsis that you like so much you're going to end up with 20 is where in the house are they going to go? Now obviously you've only got so many windows and you can't come back too far from the windows without losing enough light that your plants will suffer unless you go for additional lighting and go for some grow lights, in which case where your plants go doesn't matter. You choose where you want the plants and then put the grow lights in, and that may be your answer to growing in places that you can't otherwise use because they're too far from the windows, and those places might be better than in the windows. So you have to make these decisions, but I think the most important decision if you're going to start building a collection in the home is, do you want all your plants together as a group? Because that's going to limit how many you can have straight away, unless you can dedicate a whole room to them with grow lights. But then you have to ask yourself, am I in that room? Or do I have to go there to even see my orchids, let alone look after them? Now that might not be what you want, because I can see my orchids, if I'm sitting down watching telly, I've only got to turn my head and I can see my orchids. That's important to me, isn't it? To me, there's no point in having them if I can't be with them, can't see the blooms and this, that and the other. So, like if I converted a spare bedroom upstairs, the only time I'd ever see them was when I was sort of looking after them and watering them. And therein's another subject. If you start moving plants around different places in the home, stop and think how you're going to water them. Now that could start putting complications in there, because obviously you don't want water dripping all over your furniture and your carpets, yeah, or down the wall if you've got stuff hung on racks on the wall. And you've got to think about the best way to gain space is go vertical and have hanging racks and mounted orchids or pots with hangers that can hang on those racks. You gain a lot of space that way and can get a lot more plants in. But when you water them, they will drip. Where are those drips going to go? Can that be catered for? Or are you going to have to take them all down and take them somewhere so that where they drip doesn't matter? Like your sink, yeah? Or your bath upstairs. But bear in mind, if you start spreading your orchids around the house, if you've got to bring them back to a central point to water them, you are going to get fed up. The more you've got, you can only carry a couple at a time. You've got to take them there, deal with them, blah, blah, and then you've got to take them back again, get some more. You will get fed up, yeah? So that will limit. I've always said your workload is what will probably limit the size of your collection. And it could be just that you can handle the number of plants you've got, but you can't handle dealing with them, toing and fromming, if that's what you have to do. I mean, a lot of people put their orchids in a large container to soak. That means going and getting them and carrying them and dealing with them, and then putting them somewhere to drain a bit perhaps, and then putting them back. I don't think I could be bothered with that. I know a lot do, but I don't think I could be bothered with that. I mean, I've got it so much now that I very rarely need to take more than one step. Yeah, this is my watering station here. My water goes in that bowl. Let me just tip the camera over. Let's see what I'm talking about, because there's often new people around. I can't see what the hell I'm filming now. But actually, let's take the camera off for the rest. Have a bit of movement here, because I'm not going to go too much longer. Chuck the tripod on the floor somewhere. That's going to fall over, I suspect. Right, get my screen round the right way. Right, watering station. I know that sounds like something very elaborate, but it's not. It's a bowl tilted so that I can get at water when it's shallow. That it gets used to put the water in and pour it over my plants. Yeah? And then the plant will have a drip tray, yeah, if it's this type of plant, and it will get put on there to make sure the pot drains a bit. And then before I put it back, I will empty the drip tray. And that normally goes on the floor because that helps with the humidity. And I certainly, don't really want to reuse that bit. So this is where I stand. I can reach everything on that shelf by shuffling and bending. Bear that in mind where you put your plants. Are you very able-bodied? Can you stretch? Can you bend? Can you bend right down nearly to floor level and get up again without having to call out for help? I'm stuck. But over here, one step. That's it. It's as much as I ever need to take and bend. Yeah? Again, one step and I'm in this corner. So I can get at all my plants by taking a step. 2 small ones max. So they're all accessible. Now, there was a time when I had a bad back. It was a saga. We had to go and see somebody about it and get it dealt with. Well, it got dealt with and it's never reoccurred. And at that time, I had to shuffle all my plants round to get them off of these lower shelves and these ones right up the back there, because I couldn't get at them without some pain. And orchids are not worth pain. So I'm back to being able to use those shelves again now, and my ultimate goal really is to have plants that don't touch each other. Now, I haven't achieved it because some shelves it just don't work, but some it does, so I'm getting there. These over here have never had bugs, so they touch each other, I don't care. And quite honestly, they help keep the humidity up because they're quite squashed up together, so I'm happy with that. But over here, mostly the Oncidium types. Up here, again, a couple of Cattleya types, a couple of Dendrobiums. There's an Encyclia there, or even an Epidendrum. That's a pain in the backside for getting bugs, that one. I think I've cleared them finally, but they took the plant down. Nasty little nibblers. But because that's one of the tall shelves, as I call it, it's the only place I can put tall plants where there's some headroom. And it's the same here. I've got too many of those to be able to self-isolate them. They have to touch or they don't go on the shelf. The only way to not have that would be not have so many and get rid of some. So pretty well, all the cattleyas end up touching because I need that high shelf for cattleyas. I need that highlight area. Oh, we've got some purple. Has that opened yet? Ooh, not quite, but soon they're going to be big. Yay! Mind you, we've had those before. That was in bloom when I got it. So yeah, I mean, what I've done with these shelves is I've taken shelves out. I've rearranged them. So the top shelf has got all of its supports, 3 supports because of the weight. Yeah, and they're all locked in. And then down here, I've kept 2 of the supports, but taken the middle one out and not put the shelf on. And then down here, because this one doesn't have to hold so much, again, supports and a shelf. And then the next shelf down's missing, and then the bottom one's there again. And on this lower one here, I took the front support out as well as the middle one because I couldn't get in underneath the bar. It got on my flipping wick, and I'd like to take this one out, but I think the integrity of the shelves might suffer a bit because I have to, like this plant here, has to sort of duck under or get put in, you know, it's a bit fiddly. Same here, look, I took the front support off and took a shelf out so that I could get some taller plants. I mean, there's a shelf down there that's got 1 plant on. There's a shelf down there that's got none, but it's a short shelf. There's a bottom shelf down there that's got a, well, it's got a dying dendrobium on, but you know, so there's still spaces that I could utilise if I wanted to. And when stuff's in bloom, it migrates onto my workbench here, tucked up in the corner. And this is another place that I like to put blooming plants. Why? Because this door's open a lot of the time, and I get a nice clear view. You don't get a clear view through glass like that, do you? Could write my name in it. That'll get cleaned for the winter. But not yet. It'll only get dirty again with the sprayer going. But go vertical. That means getting some racks and hanging stuff. You can cram a lot of plants in if you do that. But you have to bear in mind you've got to be able to reach them. I mean, that is a stretch. That's tiptoes to get to that. So I can't go any higher than that. The roof's there, but you know, if the roof was higher, because I wouldn't be able to reach them. And they'd be totally dependent on being watered with a sprayer and not taken down if I did that, which I don't want to do. So yeah, space in the home, you've got to think about the practicalities of being able to look after those plants. Yeah, get at them, get water to them, use it, or get them to the water and use it and get them back again. And like I said, you know, there's a mobility element there. It's no good having your orchids upstairs and want to water them in your downstairs kitchen if you have trouble getting up and down the stairs. Yeah, think it through. So make it comfortable. It's supposed to be a hobby. It's supposed to be enjoyable, not work, not struggle. Yeah. So in the home, do you want all your plants together? Do you want to be able to see them on a regular basis, in which case that's your lounge and your kitchen area probably. If they're up in the bedroom, you won't see them much because you tend to go up there to go to sleep and it tends to be dark. So that's not a lot of good. People have used basements with artificial lighting, but again, you've got to go down there to see your plants. And is it somewhere you'd want to spend a lot of time just relaxing? I mean, eventually I had to give up my chair in here, basically because the only time it ever got used was when the cats used it rather than me. But yeah, so space allocation, and then, as I said, your collection will end up growing to the point where something's got to give. And under normal circumstances, that either means expanding where you keep them to a second area or another area to get more in that wasn't used before, or even buying a new greenhouse to sort of expand your collection. But whatever, the alternative is to not have any more orchids, or to change some of the ones you've got, or get rid of some of the ones you've got. That leads on to the next topic. We're not doing that today. Rationalisation leading to the potential of specialising. We'll cover that in another video. So anyway, think about your space, think about access to it, think about things like power and water, especially if you've got the luxury of thinking about it from scratch. Now that could be like when you move house, yeah? And you think, right, when I get to my new place, I'm going to have it right. I'm going to have it how I want it. And you get to choose and start from scratch. Oh, wonderful. I mean, I may be in that boat one day. As I've said before, I will have to get out of this place one day, and I will then eventually, as far as I know, have my own place that I can do what I want with. And I may well be able to have a purpose-built building. But that remains to be seen. So think about where you put your orchids, and are you ever going to see them, or are they going to sit there in bloom and be looked at for half an hour while you water them and then not be seen again? That's not ideal, yeah? So somewhere where you're going to spend some time would be beneficial for you and your hobby. And it also gives you more time to look at the little tykes and find all those little nasties that you miss if you don't look at them regular. Anyway. That's Sunday done. I've got no work to do out here today, none at all. I was going to water the mounts, and then I thought we're not going to get any sun today. We've got a cloudy day. I've got no heat in here. It's currently 21 degrees. It's not warm in here. So the water they had yesterday will do them. They'll be fine. And then tomorrow they can have a good water. The last couple of waterings they've had the sprayer, which is it doesn't do them properly. Keeps them ticking over, yes, but it's not a proper water. So they'll, when I proper water them, they each get taken down, and that's when they get a good look at, see if we've got bugs, or see if there's any rot, see if there's a problem, or see if there's a bonus, a new growth that I hadn't noticed. It's not all but doom and gloom. We do get some good news sometimes, or is there a spike that I haven't seen? Yeah, all those nice things. So anyway, so that's it for today, and cross one off of my list of marvellous ideas that you all came up with. Very grateful for that. And again, if you're not subscribed and you're watching, please think about doing so. It helps. And Jen McCallum, still hasn't got in touch about her plant. Now, after all this time, the number of reminders and the emails, all I can think of is that she's either changed email address or doesn't watch this channel anymore and has lost interest. But there's something not quite right there, because that person really ought to have got in touch by now. So it may be that plant has to stay until the next round of plants to go, if there ever is one, and we'll go from there. Anyway, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.